Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for From Pain Point to On Point. I'm Brittany, and today I have with me SalesScreen account executive Harry Hindess, and he is going to have a conversation with us about accountability and visualization and how that works and boosts motivation and productivity for sales reps. So, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today, Harry.
You're welcome. I'm using
Thanks.
I was thinking of using my radio voice, but I probably
Oh,
won't.
radio
The
voice.
bassy voice. No, but yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, my absolute pleasure. You went to a conference last week. Can you
I
tell me a
did.
little bit about that? How did that go?
Yeah, it was in Birmingham in the UK. So me and my colleague Vidar flew over there, and yeah, it was great. It was fun. We had a golf putting green, which was a big win with a lot of the attendees that were there. And yeah, it was a good way of getting them involved in some fun and competition and gamification. And yeah, met some people I've met there last year and in other events, but also lots of new conversations. So yeah, really, really good.
Nice. Who won the putting competition?
There's actually a lady from, I don't know if I can share what company, but
Oh,
she
okay.
performed she performed well. I don't think she got the most points, but we used our spin the wheel random winner competition.
Yes.
So she got picked as a random winner, which is nice because some people there had never like played golf, but they still tried to hit, on the putting green, and then they got a point just for trying. So yeah, so she was
Yeah,
super happy. She's won some headphones, so it was good fun.
nice. Yeah, I feel like I'm not a golfer. I've only ever done the driving range randomly, but I feel like putting is really hard. Like putting is like kind of like
It's
almost
most
harder
people's
than.
downfall. Yeah, it's most people's, part of the game they're not as good at. Like you say, the driving is like, okay, hit it as far and as straight as you can. It's
Mhm.
normally where most people spend all their time practicing, and then you get to the putting, which is really important, but often not focused on. I'm talking like I'm good at golf, but I went to a golf day, and I think I probably got the worst score in history in that golf day. So
That's only because I wasn't there. If I was there, I would
okay,
have gotten the worst golf score in history. I
yeah,
also, one last comment on golf before we move into our actual conversation, but I recently just found out, and when I say recently, I mean like last month, just found out that on a golf course, they move the holes. I
yeah.
did not,
Not whilst you're
did,
playing. They're not like moving around as you're putting, but yeah, they do in between competitions or every month or so, I think. Yeah.
I had, well, I heard every morning. I heard
Yeah,
every
so if
morning.
it's a major or like a competition, they'll normally move it, and then on the last day it can be like the hardest part of the green, because the greens are all like, normally they have hills and different undulations and things on there. So they do it to just test the professionals, basically, to make it harder. Yeah.
It's I had no idea. I had no clue.
It's
And
not common knowledge, I'd say, unless you watch golf or you play golf, you wouldn't really know. Yeah.
it's just so crazy to me because I was really like, I don't really understand what the big freaking deal is, you guys. You just shoot the ball into the hole. And like, if you go to the same course all the time, like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And then now that I have this information that you move the hole, I'm like, oh, well, this makes it exponentially harder. This is a much more, so much
Probably the
more
one the
respect.
thing that makes it even harder is the weather. So even temperature can make the ball go different distances, plus the wind or rain and such. Yeah. So
You're so right. You know, I
there you go.
really,
You
I'm
got to
just,
get into it, Britt. Get into some
I know,
golf.
I'm not giving golf the respect it deserves, honestly. But
Welcome to our golf beginners
this is a golf,
podcast.
this is a golf
If you're still
podcast
with
now.
us, you haven't tuned into the wrong podcast. You have just been listening to us talking about golf for a little bit, but
The whole thing is something that like I want to talk to every single person about because it blows my mind every time I think about it. But moving on, let's talk about accountability. Let's talk about data visualization. This is a hot topic for us. I feel like we talk about this a lot in Sales Screen. This is something that comes up for us a lot because it's a little bit like it's like the first building block of gamification. I think that we talk about it all the time as like if you can't You can't fix what you can't visualize. If you can't see it, you can't fix it. And obviously, gamification is just not a fun thing to participate in if you can't see what you're doing.
Mm.
So, kind of like my first question is what does what part does data visualization play in instilling accountability on a sales team? And like what does accountability even really look like? Like what does that mean for a salesperson?
Yeah, so you're right in what you say. Like this is often a topic. If it's not the first thing we talk about with a new prospect or client, it will come up once we start learning about their processes and their goals. And yeah, I mean, it's that whole thing. If you can't see it, how can you know what's going on? Or if you can't see your target or know your target, your performance isn't going to be nowhere near as good as it could be if you don't know where you need to get to. So yeah, being able to see it is so important. And most teams, like every sales team, will be sharing results, but it's just finding the right way of doing it that actually engages the team and doing it as frequently as possible so that people can see how they're doing, not only at the start of the day, but throughout the day, so they can like change their, it can impact their performance during the day rather than working on past data. But yeah, for me, like from my experience and working with other companies, if you have an accountable sales team, you feel like everyone's working towards the same goal, and you feel
Mm,
you don't have to sort of micromanage because they understand this is your role, this is your responsibility, and ideally they feel motivated towards it. Maybe they see more to it just than the number, like what does this number mean towards my end goal, and what does that mean for my customer, and what's it mean for the company I work for. So you have some like higher meaning to it as well. But yeah, an accountable salesperson, if you speak to them and you say like, okay, what have you been up to, it's not just going to be like a random answer. It's going to be like, okay, well, this is how I'm doing towards this goal, this is how I'm doing towards this goal, because they understand what that is and how to get there.
yeah. Do you find when you talk to prospects, when you talk to other sales managers, that they feel like they have to spend a lot of time micromanaging? Like, do you feel like that's something that comes up for them a lot?
I think it can come up, yeah, but it varies amongst the team, right? So you have some people who will be your top performers, and you can probably just let them get on with it. Yeah, for some portions of the team, it's often about reminding them, over and over again, like this is the goal, this is the important part, this is what you should be doing. So yeah, it does vary. I think every manager has a different style as well in how they want to manage, but particularly when they don't have good solutions for sharing results is when they sort of say, oh, I'm spending a lot of time on just like hand holding and like pushing people towards doing their job basically every day.
Yeah. And I think it's also really hard too, because one of the things that can be really helpful is, and also like if you don't have a visualization tool on your team, what you would normally focus on would just be end result, right? Like it would just be like, what is our progress to target? What is our, what's our revenue goal and how close are we to hitting that? Or like, what's our pipeline goal and how close are we to hitting that? And I think one of the things that is really important and is often overlooked is that we don't have a good way, managers don't have a good way of looking at the activities that are being done on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like that's such a huge miss because like the progress to revenue is like such a small piece of the puzzle. Like
Mm.
obviously that's what you're aiming for, but it's like it's such a small part of it. Like every day you have salespeople making calls, booking meetings, sending out contracts, like doing the whole thing. Like it's not as if there isn't activity happening. It's just if you don't have a data visualization tool, you're not really seeing that activity happening. Yeah, I don't know if you can add to that if you want to.
Oh, did you hear my inhale? Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, it just, yeah, reminds me a lot of conversations I have with clients, prospects, is like the managers understand that they're not maybe being proactive enough, be that like calling is always one that comes up, like making calls or following up on leads in like a timely manner. And yeah, I think that you don't always have to go as far as like sharing all of that data. A lot of companies don't want to have like a calling leaderboard, for example, or like too much visualization on that top of funnel. But as long as the team understand what they have to do, so okay, we need more pipeline, then they go, okay, well, I need to make more calls, I need to try and book more meetings, I need to follow up quicker with leads, then that can help as well, like just having visualization on that number, but only if they understand what they need to get there. And what I found most powerful is if like you give that individual their own numbers, even if you don't want to have this kind of like too much focus on calling, for example, as you don't want to feel like you're micromanaging, give them access to their own so they can at least see like, have I done enough today? Have I done enough this week versus this time last year or this, last month? But yeah, we'll talk about it more today, but like understanding what you need to do to get to that end goal through coaching, but then also bring it to life with visualization and like bite-sized targets and recognition for getting to those bite-sized targets as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also interesting too because you're an AE and you sell to
Yeah.
other sales managers, right? So like you kind of have both sides of this, and you've worked in insurance sales prior to being at SalesScreen, so like you've kind of experienced, and whether you've firsthand experienced it or you've heard it from others, kind of the run of different ways that managers can try to hold their teams accountable. What what impact does data visualization or has data visualization had on like your personal performance, whether it's been here or at other companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. Back on your point though about me selling to sales leaders, having worked obviously as a sales rep and in insurance, and we sell to insurance companies as well. I read on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I think it's the meanest sales coach, I believe he's called. Might have to figure that out. But anyway, he did a post and it was like top 5 things I wish I knew when I started sales. One of them was like sell to people like you. If you can sell to people like you have a better chance of selling. So I've found a good job because I'm selling to
Yeah.
sales leaders in insurance, and I was just a manager in insurance. So yeah,
Yeah.
but so that's good one to take away if you're listening and you're wondering why you can't sell to an accountant, for example, when you're more salesy. That could be why. But yes, yeah. So as I say, when I worked in insurance, for example, we were promoting accountability. We were putting the weekly targets on a whiteboard within the office. So every Monday you'd have different targets for the week, and you put them up there. And then as you make a sale, you'd tick that off on the leaderboard. And that's kind of like the simplest way, right, of having accountability. It's there in front of you. Everyone can see it. And that was effective in that way. And in that company, even we introduced another whiteboard, significantly larger than the other one, where
A
we
bigger,
put like
better
a
whiteboard.
bigger whiteboard, and we put on there all of the products we could sell, so different like add-ons and payment methods and such. And then we would, again, like every time you sold one of those products, you'd like tally it up on this board, and that had a big impact as well. Again, like super manual, super old-fashioned, but it still worked. So that was
Yeah.
good. Now, obviously, a lot more using SalesScreen. We've got a lot more automated dashboards and such we're using now. And for me, that's great because, it's transparency. So I can see like how I compare with my colleagues. I know that everyone else in the company can see how I'm doing. I can see how the team's doing, performing to our own team targets. So, even if like last quarter, for example, I wasn't the top performing salesperson on my team, but I contributed a chunk of the target progression so that we both reach that goal together. So you're not, and that's a good thing as well. So it helps with, knowing what you have to do every day to get to goal, seeing how you compare with your peers and what's possible versus like top performers, but also contributing to the wider goal of the business, be that like revenue goals of the company or your own team as well.
Yeah, I think the team aspect is really important because I feel like in every other company I've ever worked at, the only person that ever was recognized was the salesperson that closed the biggest deal.
Mm.
And like that really sucks if you are, you know, a workhorse
Yeah.
salesperson who is also you are closing deals, but they're smaller deals, and you are also contributing like a big chunk
Mm.
to target progression, but you're not going to be recognized because these deals are so much smaller, right? When like in actuality, maybe you did contribute more to target progression than this one person who closed a big deal, but it's not being acknowledged as such because it's just a bunch of little deals all kind of like put in. I think like the team aspect is really important because I feel like sales is a very individual kind of siloed lone wolf type of job, or can be.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you're assessed by your number, right? And your progression to your number. That's like the
Yeah.
final thing they're going to look at. So yeah, it's rather siloed, but yeah, definitely on your point as well of like the biggest sale recognition and bits and pieces like that. At the event, I did a talk on employee engagement and recognition. There's some recent research from Gallup around it, and they had like 5 key pillars to recognition in the best possible way. And one of those was personal, and another is like, I guess it makes sense. I can't remember exactly what the pillar was, but it's like it makes sense towards the company values and goals as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, if one of your company values is like working hard or teamwork or being brave, like a couple of our ones are, that doesn't always translate into being the best sales rep, but it's going to
Yeah.
contribute to the team. So you know the best teams we work with and speak to, they're recognizing individuals for doing better this month than last month or contributing to the wider team via helping other people on the team, even if they're not necessarily the top performer. And obviously, like team wins is a big one, right? I mean, there's most sales teams will have like team prizes if we hit a certain KPI as well.
Mhm. That's such a great point of like trying to how do you instill your company values into
Mm,
individuals and have them live the company value? Because we all do, right? Every company has like their set of company values. And being a cutthroat salesperson when at no matter the cost is definitely not like on anyone's company values, right? So it's like
mm,
how do you like kind of handle this dichotomy of like collaboration and teamwork and like having really great morale when you are also a salesperson who is being who's being assessed on like at times just a singular number, and it is this kind of like you got to do whatever you can to get to the top. And yeah, having access to your personal numbers but also having access to team numbers and making sales more of a team activity
mm.
can be really helpful with that. I feel like that's a really
No, it's great for new starters as well, right? Because they'll have a ramp target, which that's a way for them to progress and get to where they want to be as quickly as possible. But they can still contribute, right, to the wider team goal if they get one sale or even just booking some meetings or whatever is their initial goal. And then they can get thrown straight into like this really nice culture of the team working together and celebrating wins as well.
yeah. And being able to see like I can imagine that if you're new on a sales team and you don't have access to data and you're not able to visualize, you're not able to see what the rest of the team is doing or what you're really contributing, like you get really focused on that one number. And if that one
Yeah.
number feels like it's not hitting the mark, that
Mm.
I can imagine. I've never been a salesperson, but I can
No, but
imagine it's
and
very stressful.
it made me think of like historic performance as well.
Mm,
Like you want to go in and see, okay, what is historically a good performance? Some companies haven't really mapped out this is good, this is not so good, this is bad. But to actually have historic data and look into, oh, we used to have this, you'll get to a company, there'll be some kind of anecdote about, I don't know, a top performer. Oh yeah, they were fantastic. They left a few years ago. If you can actually go in and look at like what they were doing and replicate it as well, so having access to that historic data can be really useful.
that's so, yeah, that's so true. This is so an offshoot of this conversation of this a little bit is what types of visualization do you feel like are the most helpful for maintaining accountability?
So one customer springs to mind where this was a focus for them, and they were doing like morning meetings, not only Monday, but every morning they'd have a meeting, and they would go through the team results from the previous day. So straight away you're working on past data. It's good for the start of the day because it can kind of set you up. Okay, this is where we were yesterday. This is where we need to focus on today. But then, you could be a few hours in and you've already got those couple of sales you needed the day before. And then you're thinking, okay, how do we change direction this day? So yeah, just, really straightforward visualization of, daily targets on your multiple KPIs. But then also if you have those shared throughout the day, like ideally multiple times throughout the day, so that then people can actually shift in their activities during the day rather than waiting for the next day to figure out where they what they needed to do yesterday. It's already too late to actually impact that day.
Yeah.
We have customers where they're looking at weekly because they have a lot of reporting and they have to sort out like other areas, with insurance. Maybe it's like compliance before they can put that number in. They need to check that it was compliant sale and things like that. So that can be a week or even multiple weeks before they get the data. So finding some way of having real-time data and what's happening, even if it may get changed down the line as you kind of adjust values and such. It's a great way for people to be aligned on what they need to do every day, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, I think also too, like, it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like that's so much time that managers have to put in to try and like gather all of this data, I mean, having the meetings in and of itself is like just to go through numbers. Not to say that like that's not something that you can do or something that you should do, but like if you are giving people access to their information, to their stats in real time every single day, it's always there.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, those meetings, then you don't have to talk through the numbers. You could say, I know you've all seen the TV screen or you've all seen your dashboard on your mobile phone or wherever it is. Let's talk about, okay, how are we going to handle those objections today from customers, or has anyone got anything to share about what's working with them? Like it becomes more of a useful session rather than like, this is where we're at, this is where we need to be. Okay, off you go.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think too, it like brings up, we've kind of hit up on it a few times in this call, but just around coaching, because I think that a lot of times managers assume that coaching is the place in which they would kind of instill accountability in their reps, right? Like
Mm,
because you're having this one-to-one session, you're going through the numbers, you're going through the results, and they do have to be held accountable to like the information that's being presented to them. But if you don't have to do that part manually, if a manager doesn't have to like sit and go through numbers with you manually because you have it already and it's all there and everything is just, it's all kind of there at your fingertips, the accountability aspect when it comes to coaching kind of gets a little automated for you.
mm,
And so managers can focus on coaching in a different way. Yeah.
definitely, yeah. Yeah, no, and like we're saying, those sessions become less about the numbers and more about what do you need to
Yeah.
this week to, like, what can I do to help you be successful this week, or let's look at this call together. You've got more time. I think mainly it's time, right, to like use,
Yeah.
rather than talking through numbers, use that time to actually do something effective, some effective coaching, and that every manager wants to do. Every
Yeah.
manager wants to have an accountable team, a happy team, motivated team. That's what I always say to companies. Like they all want it, but it's just like, how can you give them a tool to actually be able to do it? Take some of that manual work away from them, and yeah, facilitate high quality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, we talked to sales managers all day long. How many of these managers do you feel like are coming to you where they think that they know what their problem is, where they feel like, they know what their problem is, they know what they need to do to solve their problem. They just need a tool that's like going to help them do it in an automated way or maybe in like a more fun or different way or whatever the case is. like kind of only to find out that like, no, the reasons why this isn't working is because your team doesn't know what the hell they're doing because they don't have access to any of their information, or like you just don't, you don't have the problem that you're trying to fix is actually something that can be fixed just by visualizing a lot of this information for people.
Yeah, I mean, we normally, a lot of the conversations start with, I want a better sales culture in my team, or I want to run more competitions. I want the team to be more motivated. And ultimately, they're trying to make people more engaged at work and boost sales performance, right? Ultimately. And then it's almost a process they go through, because if you're going to use gamification or visualization, you first need to think, okay, what do I want to visualize? What do I want to gamify? So we're always asking, like, what are your metrics? What are your targets? And you may or may not be surprised, a lot of them aren't that sure on what it is they want to visualize, or what it is that separates a top performer from the rest of the team. So some companies, they go through that process of like, okay, what are they doing every day? Okay, these are our kind of top of funnel metrics. These are the mid metrics, and this is the overall goal. So that's part of it as well. And then often, like, the visualization and the accountability again comes up when we say, okay, how are you, like, if I'm one of your sales reps, how do I know how I'm performing towards my targets? And they'll say something around like manually sharing results once a week, or we've got a CRM with a dashboard. And then you start digging, okay, but how do you know how, if you ask your rep, where are they towards target, would they be able to tell you? And then it's like, a lot of the time, okay, maybe 25% of the team would, and the rest would just kind of be like, oh, I'm not sure, I think I'm doing
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So then you realize, like, okay, actually the starting point should just be to get the team engaged with their targets and how they compare with their colleagues and the overall team goal as well. And then you start adding in gamification elements of like recognition and some competitions around those metrics. So yeah, it's often starts very high level, like I need more sales or I need more motivated team. And then you
Mhm.
start realizing there's lots of processes that you can improve in stages to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It makes me think of, we had a revenue team call. We have it every week now. And Sindra, our CEO, was talking about how a lot of times prospects will talk about how, they have Salesforce dashboards, they have dashboards in their CRM, they have dashboards in their, any other platform or tool that they may be using. They have ways of like looking at that data, but that's like a totally different experience from like looking at like SalesScreen dashboards, for instance, in the way that we like break down activities, the way that we break down numbers, the way that we visualize is so helpful and makes it easy for people to look at, because I don't feel like I'm in the minority when I say that Salesforce is not necessarily the easiest CRM to have to navigate to try and get all of your information from.
Yeah, and they're better than most, actually. Like, there's others that are
Yeah.
even worse, right? So yeah, but no, that always comes up, and I think we've built a system that is easy to use, right, and easy to understand. And that's, with Salesforce, you're going to need an admin normally to like pull your reports or adjust what you want to see. So yeah, for a sales leader or a salesperson, they just want a quick, okay, I need to know where I am to my target, or I need to know what I need to do today. Let me see
Yeah.
that now. But you can't do that so easily in a CRM. And also the target side of things, a lot of CRMs aren't good at targets and adding targets in and tracking towards targets. So which is ultimately like so important to knowing what to do every day as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. My next question for you is, what does data visualization is the lamest term. Like, we need to come up with something that's like a little bit snazzier, because data visualization sounds so lame. But what impact do you feel like that has on a sales team in terms of team morale and motivation, and even like collaboration with that team? Because we talked a lot about how sellers are just kind of like very individual, very siloed. So how do you boost morale and like team cohesion in on a team where everybody is kind of like working in their own lane, and how does data visualization help with that?
Yeah, so I mentioned the talk I did last week, and another part of Gallup's report on employee engagement, something really stood out to me, and it was that within one company, the variation of employee engagement between teams within one company is the same as the variation between companies, which I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because you'd think in one company you'd all be aligned on, okay, this is our employee engagement strategy and accountability strategy. So we'd all kind of be a bit more similar in our way of doing it. But in
Hmm.
reality, it's the same internally as it is externally, the variation. And they put that down to effective management, basically. And they gave some ideas on what is effective management. And like we said earlier, it's about like employees empowering managers to actually deliver that in middle management. So part of that effective management is like having respect of your team and helping them towards their own goals, goal setting for them, feeling accountable towards those goals as well. And that's going to make your team more engaged. So that's one way to improve, motivation in general, is to have effective management with good feedback, good recognition, good accountability towards goals. And then when you have that, when people are engaged and they're in the same team, you're going to have much nicer culture of like people who are thriving at work and wanting to work together to beat last month's performance. And then obviously if you have that transparency as well, the team can see, okay, who's dropped off, who maybe needs some support. They can replicate what the top performers are doing, and then you can also work towards the same targets. And even if you're not having the best month or quarter, you can feel like you contribute to the team winning as well. So yeah, those are kind of the key areas, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're getting close to our time here, so I want to wrap it up. But my final question to you would be, what what would a sales manager do? What would your advice be to a sales manager that does not have SalesScreen and is not going to get SalesScreen because they don't have budget or they hate gamification or whatever it is? How can they start to visualize data in a more clear and concise way and on a more regular basis for their teams? Like, do you have any like tips and tricks for managers that want to do this but don't really have an idea of how they would do it?
Yeah, great question. And if you look at a sales team and the top performers, a lot of them will be doing this on their own. So they'll be like figuring out, okay, I find out my target from my manager. Okay, what do I have to do to get there? Break down my day, and then they'll be keeping track on their performance throughout the week and month. And I'd say that that's what you can facilitate for the whole team. So it's like try and recreate what your top performers are probably doing already, but introduce this mindset more to your middle and low performers. So that could look like, if you're sharing performance updates once a day, start sharing them 2 or 3 times a day. Every time you have a meeting, make it a natural conversation. Like, okay, as a team, we're at 25% to goal on this KPI. If you're not already talking about targets and metrics regularly, try and start introducing it more and more into conversations around it. And yeah, people do this like with screenshots. You could like screenshot the CRM dashboard and just share it in Slack or Teams, like, hey guys, good job today. Make them know you're actually looking at this stuff and the whole business is keeping track on these KPIs and looking at these dashboards or looking at these Excel spreadsheets. So even though maybe they can't see it on the TV screen or on their mobile app, people are looking at it. You do need to do this, or you don't want to be too negative about it, so try and make it
Yeah.
positive. And like, but that's where bringing it up in your meetings and having it more of like a team goal to improve in these areas and reach these good targets. So it's just a more natural conversation. And then ultimately you want to get to a point where like you can go to your rep and say, oh, how are you doing on this KPI? Oh, well, I know I'm at this where I am, I know where I need to be. So yeah, more frequent, I'd say. Make it a natural conversation with the team. and also recognize people, right, when they're hitting those goals or improving this week versus last week. Like, make sure you're bringing it up in meetings and giving recognition for it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that it's a really good point of one, like just kind of like going over the data and at every chance that you get, right? Because in SalesScreen, we have TV screens that you can put in the office so like people get updated like anytime a sale is made, anytime an achievement is unlocked, anytime any like major milestone, right? So like we're kind of like always up to date on what's happening and what everybody is doing all of the
Mm.
time. But having that kind of like source of truth to start like any conversation, whether it's a team meeting or a one-on-one call or whatever, and just making it so that like you're kind of like living and dying by the data, which I think is something that that's not something that if you don't have a visualization tool, it's not something that sales teams really get the chance to do, right?
Mm.
Like they don't get the opportunity to live and die by the data because they only get the data when they get it. And if they're not getting it frequently enough, like what can you do about it, you know?
Yeah, and the TVs is a good point because it made me think about how a lot of companies are worried about getting more KPI focused because they feel like they'll go from just looking at monthly results to like, okay, how many calls has the team made or how many meetings have we booked? And they'll think that will put some people off. But if you could mix it with the right amount of recognition and team targets, it's actually a good thing. It's engaging. And like we say, all the research says if you're accountable and you know your goals and you feel something towards getting those goals and motivate to do it, you're more engaged and happy at work. So it's just finding that balance. And the screens are great because you have like the celebrations alongside
Yeah.
the leaderboards. But if you can't do that, it's just, okay, manually share your KPIs, but make sure you're recognizing people when you share it. Okay, oh, Brit's done better today than yesterday, as you share those results and also in your meetings as well. So it's not a negative discussion
Yeah.
on, oh, where are we at? Oh, we're not doing well enough. It's a positive discussion using data.
I love that. Well, Harry, this has been a really great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And people can find you on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and that's great. And also through our demo form, request a demo form on the website. They
Yeah,
can get a
there's a
meeting with you
chance you're going to
directly.
come through to me. Yeah, if you fill in that form.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Harry. I really appreciate your time, and we'll have you on the podcast again
I
another
look forward
time.
to it. Thank you very
Awesome. Thank you.
much.
Thank you.